Welcome to the Alliance Against Violence and Adversity AVA Webinar Wednesdays. I'm your host, Alexandra Lazoshak, a master's student on the child team here at the University of Calgary. So a few procedural things before we get started, just so everyone knows that we are recording this webinar for it to be available on YouTube. And throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A function near the bottom to ask your questions to our speaker, which will be time at the end to discuss in the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. On a national level, we encourage all Canadians and visitors to Canada to learn about the Indigenous peoples of the lands in which they live, work, or visit and play, and become engaged allies together. We, as Canadians, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, respect the self-determination of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit and their rights and responsibilities in cultures, language, and the pursuit of wellness. The title of today's webinar is I Know a Guy. Abuse thrives in silence and has no boundaries. And today we are joined by Dr. Susan Chuang. Sue is a professor at the University of Guelph, Ontario, and is an accredited family mediator. She also received a Master's of Science in Elementary Education and a Master's of Science and Doctorate in Human Development at the University of Rochester, New York. After receiving a postdoctoral training at the National Institutes of Health in Maryland, she was also assistant professor for 3 years at the Syracuse University. In 2006, she joined the faculty at the University of Guelph. With over 25 years, Chuang has expertise in parenting, fathering, parent-child relationships, child-youth mental health, and various sociocultural contexts. Her more recent focus has been on union family breakdowns, high conflict, family and intimate partner abuse, and false allegations. Thank you so much, Sue, for joining us today. I'm incredibly excited for your talk today. I'll hand it over to you now.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Ava, too, for inviting me and giving me this wonderful opportunity to not only present the work that I do, but to also begin a conversation. And then with hopes that, for future collaborations or partnerships, that would be wonderful. So please reach out to me. So let me just share my screen so I can get my presentation going. So before I begin, here we go. Before I begin, I'd like to just do a few advertising of some of the events that I have that's coming up. Can everybody see this okay and hear me all right? Perfect. Okay, so first of all, I would love for all of you to see visit my website. It's ifalliance.net, International Families Alliance. And I started this alliance back in 2021 when I started to explore issues of separation and union breakdowns, high conflict and issues of abuse and topics about abuse against parents and children. And so if you go to this website, this is where you're going to find a number of events. And this one is Shirk funded, and this is also in partnership with AVA. So thank you very much. We have a free legal perspectives webinar next week. I hope that you are interested in joining, and so you can go to the ifalliance.net website and sign up. This is free, and it's a great opportunity to talk to two experts in the field, two lawyers, one family and one criminal lawyer. And the next thing that I'd like to talk about is this wonderful conference that I am in the midst of organizing, which will be in lovely Barbados this September. So if you're interested, it is a hybrid event. If you're not able to go there and fly there, we're also going to be online as well. Also in partnership with AVA is we have a church connection grant so that we can actually organize a conference in São Miguel, the most beautiful place I've ever been to. And it's a small island off of Portugal. And we are now currently open for a call for proposals. And it's due in November. So if you have any interest in any of the events or you want to talk about it, please go to the website and please feel free to contact me and we can Zoom and have a chat. All right, so let us begin the webinar. So again, thank you very much for Ava to having not just my webinar, but also all the webinars that they have provided that are always free. So, oh, okay, so I'm going to be presenting today on I Know a Guy. Abuse thrives in silence and has no boundaries. Okay, my My slides are not moving forward. Let me just find another way. Okay, I found another way. Okay, so the agenda today is first I'm going to show you a couple of videos. And so just they are very sensitive, so be mindful of that. Then I'm going to follow it up by a quiz, a very quick quiz, very fun. And then talk about some research and statistics, and then talk about one of the studies that I am conducting right now. So I'm having, okay. So here's the video.
I was sexually abused when I was about 8 by an older male cousin. I've been sexually assaulted on 4 different occasions.
I was 6 years old the first time that I was molested. A neighbor named Hank took me into his house. And at first it was hugging, and then his hands traveled. And when I tried to push him away, he beat me. And then he raped me.
And I was haunted by the fact that this happened in a little girl's bedroom. For a long time, I blamed myself. I was just angry because I'd go to school and nobody in school knew what was going on.
When I tried to tell my mom, she kicked me out of the house and laughed at me and told me I would never deserve anything better.
It became something that lasted until I was 17 years old.
I remember after it happened and after he left, sitting on a bed for a while, torn up and saying, I am never going to tell another living person about this. I went and got my friends and I drove them home.
Thank you for reading that, Katrina.
Thanks.
Now, if you had the chance, how would you respond to this person's story?
Okay, so watching that video, what are your thoughts? What words come to mind? What support systems and services did you think of? Right, so I'll just give you a minute just to think about that. Okay, so let's watch the next video, second part.
Feel like, or just like hug her. And just let her know it's not her fault.
You were a little girl. It's not your fault.
You actually have the chance to meet that person because they're here today. This is James Metters. This is Mark Godoy Jr. This is Isaac Andrade. This is Walter Castaneda. This is Glenn Hall. He served in the Army for 30 years, retiring as Command Sergeant Major. And what you just read is his story. What you just read was his story.
Oh my God.
Are you too?
Good.
I know the statistic is 1 in 6. I'll go into a room and I count 6 men. Like there's somebody else in here. You're probably dealing with it the same way I've dealt with it, which is not talking about it.
To share the same experience, I was young and I was in college. I was sexually abused. We don't talk about these things, but it happens.
I grew up in a Latino household where my dad telling me, no llores, cabrón. No eres vieja, you're not a girl, don't cry. And on the other side, you're getting abused and you don't know what to say.
I joined the Army to die. I was abused from the time I was born till I was 17. Masculinity made me put away what I was feeling and not really deeply feel what had happened to me, recognize and acknowledge what happened to me.
Getting suspended in the 4th grade, getting in a fight, getting expelled from one high school. It's all part of the abuse. And it's all part of me, the child, my inner child, acting out and starving for attention.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I rose in the rank of the military, they like tough guys. But inside I was dying. Still makes me emotional. That what happened to me wasn't because of who I am. It was something that was done to me. It's not me.
I know a lot of males are too afraid to speak up, but I'm real open because I want to inspire the male survivors. That not just males with disabilities, but also males without disabilities.
Identify myself as Black gay survivor. I had a lot of fear, and I just posted a link on Facebook saying, "This is my story. If you want to read it, you can read it." And the response I got after that was nothing but kind. Every time I share my story, especially as a man, I always hear back, "Hey, can I talk to you? Yeah, what's up? This happened to me too. This happened to me too. This happened to me too."
I'm not doing it just for myself. It's for many others whose voices not been heard before.
It's really hard not to cry. I'm really glad you've done the work, and I know that you changed somebody's life. So that's all I can say with that.
You can survive it. You can get through it.
I think you're just so strong. Like, I don't know if you know it, but you're very strong.
Thank you.
Okay, so now what are your thoughts and reactions to that? What words come to mind? And the next question, just like before, what support systems, services did you think of? And was it different from the other time I asked you? Okay. So now we're going to be taking a quiz. So what I like to do is I like to show you a some multiple choice questions, and just think to yourself, there's 4 options, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when I show you the question, maybe with your hands, you can just figure out which number you're going to choose. Okay, so here we go. Let's see how well you do. The first question, what percentage of domestic violence incidences are initiated by men to women? Is it 17%, 37, 53, or 71? I'll give you a moment to think about the answer. Okay, I can't see any of you, so I'm just going to move forward. The answer is 17%. Okay, was that shocking? The next question. What percentage of domestic violence incidences are initiated by women to men? Is it 3%, 11, 25, or 31? Okay, the answer is 31%. And you can see the note below. It was reported by men and women who actually did self-disclosure. The next question. What percentage of domestic violence incidences are initiated by both parties? So bi-directional, both involved. Is it 15%, 28, 45, or 53? Give you a moment. And the answer is 53%. So I'm wondering how many of you got it correct. If we were doing this in person, I would have chocolates and I would award you for every right answer that you got. Anyways, so just before I talk about the actual statistics and where these numbers came from, have you ever or know someone who insulted or belittled someone? How about hit, pushed, or slapped somebody? How about, do you know anybody in a high conflict or say a difficult separation and or divorce? Were there any threats of taking the child away? Was there any limiting, varying parenting time with no legal authority or agreement between the parents? How about making all of the decisions regarding the child with no legal authority or agreement? And as you know, all of these issues is a form of abuse. So what is the research behind this? How about the statistics? And are these numbers that I just provided in the quiz, are they really true? And they are. And it's not just 1 or 2 studies, it's well over 200 studies. Archer in 2000 explored 82 studies over 18,000 couples. And what Archer found was that women were were greater than men to be physically aggressive. However, what is important to note is that they do suffer greater injury when there is physical aggression against them. Women were at a greater rate than men to initiate domestic violence disputes with partners. In 2012, there was a meta-analysis that was examined by Lankenstein and Rollins and colleagues, and they looked at the motivations for intimate partner violence, and they explored 74 studies. And then Alexandra Lysova and her colleagues in 2024, it was just published last year, and they continue to that study to replicate what has happened since 2012 and to now, and they explored 64 studies. And all of these stats, they were similar in terms of their numbers. So let's now have a better understanding about the various contexts of where does abuse thrive. And did you know in Canada, child abuse in Canada before the age of 15, right? 60% experience some form of maltreatment. For girls, it's 63 if you look at by gender, and for boys it's 53%. But that's extremely high, more than 1 in 2 children. How about sextortion at this age among children? It has increased by 815% over the last 5 years. And these are all Canadian stats, right? 45% of adolescents report dating violence, and the most common is emotional abuse. So you can see where from it, developmentally, the abuse, the experiences of abuse starts early on and goes throughout. And it's really sad to see, especially when it comes to dating at such an early age. So how about the context for fathers? So the importance of fathers in terms of secure attachment. I'm sure we all heard of a secure attachment and know. And what is a secure attachment? It's when a parent, a caregiver, is sensitive and responsive to their child's needs. And research has shown time and time again that fathers are fairly similar to mothers in terms of their levels of sensitivity and the way they respond to their children in effective ways. Okay. And then next, how about the infant's internal working model? So when children have that first relationship, second relationship with their caregivers, that becomes a working model for how relationships should be. And these are based on their early experiences with that parent. And that is why fathers are important, and any other caregivers, extended family, whether it be mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, right? And fathers also provide a unique contribution to their children's health and their development. It's a unique to their health, well-being, and it's also linked to future developmental outcomes. For example, it's linked to psychosocial development, right? Adjustment, emotional regulation, social competence, the ways that they interact with their peers, right? Cognitive outcomes, and on and on. And so fathers are important in their children's lives. And this continues this positive caregiving, regardless if it's mothers and fathers. The more caring caregivers in their children's lives, the better. And it's vital for their children's functioning in later development. So what is the Canadian context when it comes to issues of separation? More in recent times, and I'm sure many of you know this, that the divorce rate, and this is not including common law relationships, and a lot of people are not getting married per se, but it's 38% is the divorce rate, with a marriage average age of a marriage is 15 years. So you can see here from the graph, this is based on Canadian data from 2021. 58% are married, but almost a third are single-headed households, right, of mothers, and almost 14% are common law, and then there's 6% for father-headed households. So here's something I'd like you to think about. So in 2019, there was a survey that looked at what was the parenting time arrangements among children who have experienced some level of separation or divorce. And during the survey, 18% of those children were currently experiencing a separation and divorce. So if I were to ask you, what do you think is the percentage of those children, this all has to equal to 100%. How many of those families do you think were having equal shared parenting time? So that's up to 40% time shared between mother and father or two caregivers, right? How about regular visits? Irregular visits versus remote and no contact. And this needs to equal to 100%. Give you a sec to think about that. And here's the data. Only 21%, less than a quarter of children are seeing their both parents at equal shared parenting time. 36% are regular visits. Okay, 17% is irregular. We got 8%, that's remote, so once in a while. And then 19%, almost 1 in 5 children, suddenly do not see and have contact with that other parent. And that means that it's a surprising 44% of children, because of a union breakdown and a divorce, that these children no longer or have minimal contact with their parent, that non-residential parents. But who are these parents? Well, I think it would be safe to say that because and since almost 87% of the children live with the mothers only, that most of these children are growing up with almost no contact with their fathers or are fatherless children. And so you think to yourself, then what is the impact of it? Does it even matter to children? And actually, it does matter. Is less fathering turns to fatherlessness? And is this form of abuse, right, towards the children? Because we know that children have the right, according to the UN Convention, Article 3, that children have a right to have relationships with their loving caregivers and extended family. So because of when there is a union breakdown, and we can see the stats, especially in Canada, and also I think it is similar in many other countries, that when there is a union breakdown, the father-child relationship becomes at a substantial risk. Fathers become relegated to potential visitors, quote unquote, parents, instead of the other parent, right? And also, this fatherlessness can lead to extreme gatekeeping. So perhaps at the beginning, the relationship, the separation, the fathers were seeing the children, but over time, is it becoming less and less to the point that they're no longer seeing their children. And which is very surprising that according to the survey from Canada, that after 5 years of separation, 1 in 4 children have no contact with their parents. 10 years later, after the separation, 40% of those children have no contact with the non-residential parent, which is usually the father. And you can actually see how it's also an issue in England, Germany, and Sweden. And I was very surprised about Sweden at 36%. So what does this mean in terms of men's experiences with intimate partner abuse? And this was a SSHRC-funded study, and I had assistance from the Canadian Centre for Men and Families in terms of data collection. So they were very valuable in this collaboration. And so in this study, what's really important when you want to find out whether it's men or just anybody, it's difficult to talk about intimate partner violence, intimate partner abuse, and trying to recruit. But it's important to hear from those surviving those victims. And so this study, which was able to recruit quite a number of men, was because instead of putting a flyer out and asking about intimate partner abuse, we actually use the term boundary crossings, which was an amazing article by Arlene Walker from Deakin University in Australia in 2020 when she published her work and actually used the words boundary crossings. And we found that people were much more open to be willing to talk about these issues. And boundary crossings is defined as any behavior that violates or restricts a person's right to safety, self-determination, self-esteem, privacy, reputation, and self-expression. Boundary crossings can be verbal, emotional, or physical. And that's how we started with the study. And then we were able to recruit quite a number of Canadians. And so just focusing on the fathers, because my time is limited, so I narrowed down the data to showcase for 120 fathers. And the question was asked in the last recent, if they were in an intimate partner, relationship, and if they experienced any form of a boundary crossing, and if they did, what was if they could tell us about the latest boundary crossing. And if you can see from this bar graph, the fathers experience a whole host of different forms of abuse: verbal abuse, controlling behaviors, manipulation, psychological, including emotional abuse, physical, financial, and also extreme gatekeeping or parental alienation, and other issues. Okay. And so when we asked the men, here are some, and this was a survey that was put out, and the men were able to type in the open-ended boxes. Okay. So this is what they wrote. So one 50 to 50-year-old father said, I was marginalized and belittled in my own house in front of my kids. Another father said, parental alienation and loyalty conflict unfortunately kept my daughters away from me for years, and that made me feel like an old piece of okay. Another father said, last time together, she was yelling and swearing at me and slammed a door, breaking the door frame. Now I am facing false allegations that are her projections of her behavior onto me. After that, she damaged computer monitor and the house. And another father said, she went to psychologist appointment with me and used the information regarding triggers to set up incidences, mostly mostly triggering my insecurities. So then the survey also then asked them, what are your views of yourself? Right? And one father said, a young father said, I am insecure and I'm not very confident, but I am genuinely a caring and compassionate person. Another father said, I am struggling right now and for quite some time. I get the feeling I can't turn things around. I feel like a failure. There is always a sense of self-loathing. Sometimes it helps motivate me. Other times it's debilitating. And then we also ask them, how about your views of masculinity? And one person said, I'm not able to openly express my concerns to anyone because I've been told that I'm just whining and I should just stop complaining. It compounds the idea that manliness just means stoicism and hiding your pain and shame. Another father said, I often feel conflicted about how to address boundary crossings due to much of the more recent cultural messaging I hear about what is and isn't acceptable for a man to express. All right. And so my final remarks are this. I finished much faster than I had thought. Abuse has no boundaries, right? And abuse is a human issue with long-term consequences, not just for the fathers, but the children and them moving forward as well. And it's amazing the power of knowledge, right? And a bit of information goes such a long way. Many fathers that we had talked to, we also did interviews afterwards. And a lot of fathers and also a lot of people in general who are in abusive relationships actually don't realize that they're in abusive relationships until years later. So the question then is what can we do, right? As service providers, as academics, we teach a lot of students in our classes. What can we do to educate, to inform people about what does a healthy relationship look like and what is an unhealthy relationship? What are the signs of abuse and what are they? How do we define them? Right? Because greater awareness of these characteristics of abuse can help people in their circumstances. And I think that together, when we work together to combat all forms of abuse, we can work together. So hopefully this is a starting position of my work to you, and hopefully we can have some collaborations and some discussions. And by the way, please hug your family every day. And thank you very much. Here are my references, and there I will be sharing them. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue, for
Okay.
joining us
I
today.
thought I would run out of time. My apologies.
Oh, all
Usually
good.
An hour and a half, but I can't see anybody, and usually we talk during each part, but I know it's being recorded, so I couldn't engage anybody. But perhaps we can spend some time actually going through the videos and actually discussing and talking. I just didn't take any questions because I think it was just going to be recorded, right, for
Yeah,
the webinar. I can stop
absolutely.
sharing.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions or wants to discuss further and have their chance to talk, please put that in the Q&A function at the bottom and we'll dive to that. But I do have some questions if you don't mind me
Sure.
asking. Yeah, so in your experience and research, how do men typically describe boundary crossings in abusive relationships? Do they use other words? Is there other type of things they discuss besides especially when it comes to verbal, psychological, or controlling behaviors? And can you explain how these types of abuses impact a person's sense of self?
Right. And I think that, I mean, we can even just look toward ourselves, right? And do we recognize issues of boundary crossings? I think the boundary crossings is a newer way of, recruiting. And I think people don't use the word boundary crossings, but it's usually abuse. And I think that when people are facing these issues, that's why it may be a little bit more difficult for them to actually realize that they are being abused or they are abusing somebody, right? Because they don't recognize those issues. And I think then it becomes more difficult for them to then admit, like, really, I'm in an abusive relationship. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people, a lot of men can recognize somebody else's forms of abuse, that their relationships are in like not so healthy relationships. And but then for themselves, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Also, it starts, maybe it's small. Oh, name calling, they're teasing. Okay, they hit me a little bit, but and you see society, you see how it's portrayed. There's been experiments if you go onto YouTube, and if you go into a park and you see, and they're actors, right? So you see a man abusing a woman, and then immediately everybody that passes by does something, right? But they do the exact same thing, but the opposite. The woman is verbally pushing, grabbing, punching a guy, and 200 people will walk by. Some people are actually very excited and they go, yeah, get him, right? And so it's that societal views. So then what does that say to men? Right? What does that say to boys? And that's why I also talk about, how about the boys? At the beginning, like, is that recognized for them that they are being abused, or they have, there's emotional abuse? Are they able to talk about it? Because if you don't talk about it, you don't deal with it, right? Then those people tend to be more likely to become victims and or perpetrators, right? And girls are more socialized to be able to talk to people, to express your feelings. But even just seeking out mental health for anything is very still a little bit not socially acceptable. And if so, how much, how many social workers or therapists or counselors are trained to talk about, first of all, trauma? Are they trauma informed? But also, are they gender sensitive? And especially now, it's not just about men and women, but also the fluidity of gender and those kinds of complexities of that relationship. And how is that received? Are people believed, or are people just saying, are people laughed at? And I think that a lot of the men, when we did the interviews and we did ask about the study asked about social support, formal and informal. And when we asked them, a lot of them, a good portion of them said that when I did tell somebody, they either were told to be quiet or they were laughed at or wasn't taken seriously. And there's others too who actually were very supportive. But then some therapists didn't know what to do, right? They hear you, they're
Mhm.
compassionate, but then what are the steps forward? And they didn't know, right? So, and there's some who are really great. So it's a complex situation. And the question then is where does that training come from? Where's that education? And that's why I think as academics, at least we have, in classroom settings, like I teach human development. And I hope I slow down my lectures. I have it in my textbooks. So and of course, so their sense of self for anybody. If you're victimized, you're facing difficulties, you're facing any barriers, and it's not taken seriously, or you can't find that help that is positive, that is supportive, it becomes an issue, right? It becomes a psychological. It goes against your psychological well-being. It goes to your
Mhm.
self-worth, and even outside of abuse, even just the issues of self-esteem, self-worth is crippling, right? So compound that in terms of abuse, like in that kind of challenge and barriers and detriment. But then also, how about parents, fathers? And this time, this in my study, I focus on fathers, but that complexity as well with the children. And what are you going to do when you have children involved? It becomes extremely difficult.
Definitely. Thank you so much for such a fulsome answer. I truly appreciate it. And the trickle down, I'm writing lots of notes for myself, so I appreciate it. We have some questions from the Q&A, so I'll start with someone asked about suggested solutions for men facing boundary crossing issues after separation.
Oh, what are my solutions? Oh, I see. What are
Yeah, so what
my
your yeah,
solutions?
what
It's like, I thought they were going to offer some solutions. Like, that's great. Give me some. I think that I think the first one is actually really acknowledging and realizing what is that abuse, right? And then also not being ashamed to seek out help. Finding the organizations, victim services, like in Canada, let's talk about Canada, victim services, or the like the Canadian Center for Men and Families or other organizations, but also being fully honest and open about what that abuse is. I think that men would tend to focus more on the physical abuse or those kinds of abuse, but they won't talk about the psychological, the complexities of that abuse, right?
Mhm.
And so that's important to acknowledge, but then also being able to figure out what are your steps and forward, right? And it may take multiple people to help you to, like, there's many things we can't control in our lives, but there's a few things that we can. So then it's important to say, okay, what is the safe way to move forward? If you have children, especially, what are ways to ensure that you have a safety net? You have people who can assist you to get out safely. Just not that long ago, I helped two women get out of their situation, right? It's like, okay, but this is what you need to do. Remember, like your important documents. Do you have that in somewhere else? Have you put things in place? Do you know where to go? Don't be alone. Are you going to be alone? Or where's your exits? Be careful that does anybody know about this situation? Or if you're going to meet somebody, right? And so I was able to get them out, right? So to me, it's not about a men or women, or it's like anybody who's is in an abusive relationship, having that strength, because it's difficult to go and to leave, especially if you have a long-term relationship, right? It's not feel like, oh, just get out, just walk. It's easy. It's like, it's not that easy. And also finances, all the other parts that go with it. Just trying to make sure that you have people in place, or you memorize phone numbers, right? Maybe if your phone is taken, like, or all your documents, have you, even just for traveling, did you photocopy it and email it to yourself? Do you have copies of things? Right? Do people know about your situation? Are you documenting? Especially for men, for people not believing, document. And that's really important. Documenting these, whatever they are, abuses that they may
Mhm.
be.
Definitely. Thank you for diving into that. I have another question here for you that have there been any studies connecting male suicide to IPV and loss of access to children?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. Divorced men are 8 times more likely to to die by suicide, right? And so many fathers, and that's why I focused in this webinar on fathers. A lot of fathers have said, and especially union breakdowns. It's very time consuming, emotionally consuming, but also financially consuming as well. And fathers have said, take my job away, take my money away. But if you really want to get at me, is you take my children away. I know a father who is on my listserv for all of these events. Okay. And he emailed me and he said, please take me off your listserv. He goes, and he's been on the listserv for a while, for a couple of years. And he's like, I haven't seen my children for 30 years and it's just becoming way too painful. And that's 30 years, right? And so, you know, it's, I forgot the question now because um, there's so many things to say. But yeah, it's more of, you know, I forgot the question. What was the question again?
It was about have there been studies connecting male
Oh,
suicide to
yes, yes,
IPV and loss of access
yes.
to children? So yes.
Right. And I think that when people think of the union breakdown or going to court and you think of the high, the lawyers, the mediators, the court costs, it's all financial. But what gets overlooked actually is the impact of not seeing your child. And so, even when it goes irregular visits, remote, and to me, that's also emotional abuse. It's one of the worst forms, right, of abuses is the parental alienation, right, is the extreme gatekeeping because it's on both sides. And also it's not just the father or the mother or whoever the second caregiver, the children, but when there's a break and a cut off of that second caregiver, the non-residential parent, it also most likely than not cuts off the extended family. You see, there's a rise in alienated grandparents. You see that there's in Canada and also in other countries, there is a law now that is in place where grandparents can actually sue their children, right? Take their children to court to see their grandchildren. The fact of breaking that relationship that is so, part of their identity, part of who they are, right? Their roles in life taken away is extremely detrimental. And so this is why men are, and men in general, I think, are also, I think the stats are like 80%, like in terms of suicide, men are at a greater risk. And part of it is the union breakdowns, the children, but also it's also they're not able, of seeking out help, that socialization, internalizing everything, keeping everything to oneself, right? That is a form of, so these forms, also false allegations are terrible, right? I mean, so we don't need to go into the details, like, but falsely accusing and you see it in the news, you see, but that emotional, it's more of the emotional detriment that people have, right? And how it changes one's lives. And if you look at the stats in Canada, right? 38%, 40%, whatever the percentage is of a union breakdown, those children, right, growing up in litigation and parents realizing this and seeing this as well. So both parents are affected, not just with their experiences, but then also seeing the impact on the children. What are we going to do? How are we going to move forward to make sure that, sure, don't live together, but how can we make it amicable? How can we minimize lawyers? For me, when I know two fathers who had spent literally $1 million in lawyer fees. And I'm thinking that money could have paid for all of your children's education, bought them down payments for houses. It's like, to me, I find that offensive, right? Anyways, there's so many layers and so many components of this. But I think the importance is having people understand what is an abusive relationship, figuring out how can you deal with it, how can you better communication, parenting practices, are you on united front so that you can prevent these issues. A lot of these things are absolutely preventable, right? The question then is, how can we work together? How can we educate each other, about, the complexities of families?
Definitely. Thank you so much for diving in. We'll move on we have lots of questions now,
Oh,
so I want to
sorry,
make sure we
sorry. I have so many things to say. I'm sorry.
No, and I appreciate it. You're fulsome answers. I appreciate it. And I guess our listeners definitely appreciate it too. But to kind of move on as well,
For sure.
one of our listeners were saying, I'm thinking about all of you said and seeing from the Caribbean context that there's so much that will be disregarded as normal behavior, which we
Right.
know as abuse. How do you find the information or intervention is received in different cultures as you move to do conferences and other like international events?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. And that is why I have to physically be in Barbados, okay, in the Caribbean context to understand it. No, as I was organizing this conference with my co-organizer, Rebecca, in the Caribbean, because she's from the Caribbean, she came to my conference last year. And I've been talking with the people in the Caribbean, and there is that culture, right, of, non-residential fathers or on the side, abuses kind of similar as in Canada, right? The lack of engagement of caregivers in the Caribbean. I think that there's a lot of commonalities. I think abuse is abuse, but then, you are up against the legalities, right? What are the laws within the country? So, like right now, I'm currently editing a book on intimate partner violence against men, and we've got 15 countries that are represented. There are some countries that don't even have a law that you could even charge a woman for violence, right? But that context is, even though it is common, or even if you see in cultures, even in Canada or wherever, like, oh, that's okay. You can hit your child. But we were able to dismantle like corporate punishment, right? That was seemed okay before, but it's more of trying to educate and say, you know what? Yes, that happened to you, or maybe you're hitting less than your father. Like, that's still not okay. But why are you doing this? Why are we using violence or abuse? It's because we're, I don't think that people want to be like grow up and say, you know what? I can't wait to get a partner so I can beat the crap out of you. I don't think so. I think it's more of frustration and not being able to express oneself, not to be able to come to an agreement, to compromise, to negotiate, right? And then, so then you resort to these other ways, which are not effective, first of all, and harmful in many ways. And so I think that as we go into the Caribbean, and we talk to the people like on the ground, and also there's people that will be zooming in from Trinidad, Jamaica, and some other places. It's more of, okay, what can we then do? Right? I'm an academic. Are you a social, are you a provider? Are you an academic? Where are we going? Formally and informally. How can we say, you know what? That is just not okay. You might think, and then go, well, but then if I gave you an option, that's why I do free parenting workshops. If anybody wants a free parenting workshop, I'll do it. You know, just get some people, formally, informally, doesn't matter, friends and family, doesn't matter. Okay. But if I said, okay, you're yelling, I've gone into hundreds of homes in crisis situations. I'm not a therapist or a counselor, but I'm well versed in parenting. Okay. And I say, okay, listen, and I go into like, regardless of education, regardless of income, regardless of if you're an immigrant or not, most parents don't realize that they actually influence their children. And they would be yelling and screaming. I would say, okay, listen, you've been doing this for years. This doesn't work. If I can give you another solution, it'll take a half an hour. You don't have to yell. You don't have to do all these things. Would you take it? They will. And I think that's why people go and use other forms of abuse, because they just don't know what is that other way. How can I express myself? You're not listening to me, but then you're yelling at me. I'm yelling at you. Things escalate very fast, right? So the bottom line is then walk away. At least walk away. Don't say anything because you can't take back what you said, which can then escalate, which can't be forgotten. And then it, like that. Okay.
Yeah.
You can tell me to stop at any time.
No, I will never. I love everything. Like, just it's very important, and everything it layers onto one another and trickle down. That's a really important thing, is that it doesn't come from one source. It comes from so
Right.
many different sources, right? And leads into different actions and behaviors. So I really do appreciate you diving in. And there's a lot of like training out there, are like webinars relating to how the immigrant experience from different cultures coming into the Canadian context and learning what that kind of means for the first time as well. So it's very similar to past webinars. So I really appreciate you diving in as well.
And also, I just one thing. And also, I don't think that you will find anybody out there who would say abuse is okay. If that's your premise, it's universal. Just because you condone it, just because you get away with it, does not mean it's okay. It's not okay. Right?
Mhm.
Okay. Anyways, that's what I just want to say.
Very important. Yes, definitely. And then this one's a double parter. So let me know if you want me to rephrase it. So one of the listeners was like, how do you define violence? And is this different than the dictionary definition? Is your definition shared or recognized by organizations or in the literature? And then they also go forward to talk about, as far as they know, they have 4 categories in abuse in regards to children. So like the psychological, the sexual, neglect, and verbal, mental, emotional. And they were wondering where I could find gatekeeping as abuse in the literature.
Yes, that's a great question. There's actually, I believe, on the Canadian website I've got, it's actually in one of my in my textbooks. There's like, I think 11 forms of abuse, right? There's different kinds of abuses, different forms of violence, right? So, and it goes, and so, I mean, even if you Google, I mean, so what are the forms that, and the definition that I use is boundary crossings. It is the components of boundary crossings or intimate partner abuse or violence or abuse. It is a universal definition, right? It doesn't contradict or leave out what the UN convention would say, or or the government would say. right? And so, there's different kinds of abuses, right? But it is in more general, it's more of, violating somebody's rights, right? For safety, violating somebody's rights and safety in physical, right? Psychological, right? Emotional, about like violence, right? Those crossings, that violation, right? Against their rights, of their safety and their health, right? So that would be more of a broader one, but then any forms of that. Oh, it seems like there's seven. Anyways, there's different kinds of abuses. So it's just a violation of rights, human rights, and these are basic human rights, right? It's the same thing for like children. What is maltreatment? Is because you violated their rights for, a safe environment. How you have to feed them, house them, take care of them, right? So does that answer that question?
I believe so. Yeah, just define violence. I did, and yeah, because there is so many different definitions compared to the dictionary, to compared to UN standards. So it's just as you mentioned, the violation of basic human rights, or someone doesn't feel safe
Right.
physically, psychologically, and I think that's a really good open-ended question answer for everything for this
Yeah.
topic. So I appreciate it. Um, yeah, I have another comment. So I'm not sure if it's a question, but I'll read through it. Abuse is not okay, but some people don't recognize their actions as abusive. I
Yes.
once knew someone who thought every couple argued in this way, and it was
Yes.
normal to them. They wouldn't see it from another point of view. This is what they knew and believed.
Yes. Absolutely. This is why we have to educate. And this is why a lot of people don't realize they're in abusive relationships until it keeps going on and on until then it comes to a deep end, right? And yeah, and that's why it becomes very difficult that's why, abuse thrives in silence. It's like, oh no, you're just teasing, or and that's why if you look at it's interesting that you had said that, because that's why if you look at the surveys, a lot of people get very upset with my quiz. Oh my gosh, why can't, it's like, yes, but because people don't, and these are all self-reports. It's women actually disclosing that they've engaged in these behaviors. Men have engaged in these behaviors, right? But it's the way that we define it, or the way in our families, like you said. Okay, so, but this is what happens. But just because it keeps happening, that's not okay, right? But then it's trying to teach people and to educate them and learning, like, but did you know name calling? I mean, this is why, you see children, but the thing is, we do know what abuse is, because when you ask children, are you even think to yourself, like, that was hurtful, that wasn't nice, you know why? Because you hurt my feelings, because you said something. We all know what is hurtful, what is abusive, but then we don't put the word abuse on it. This is why you see like cyberbullying, all these things. People are like, oh, it's so fun, and da, da. But then all of a sudden, it's like that child died by suicide. Why? Because they've been bullied, cyberbullying, right? So when you're a child, we call it, oh, it's bullying. Well, bullying is abuse, but we call it bullying. What?
Mhm.
But now we're going to move to, and then like aggression. Wait, okay, but aggression, what kind of form of aggression? This is physical. So and we're all oh, and then academically, yeah. So there's two kinds of aggression: physical aggression, and research has shown that boys are more likely to engage in physical aggression, and social aggression, social isolation. Okay, girls are more likely to do this. Well, that's a form of abuse as well. So, but yet when it comes to saying, but if you're isolating or taking away somebody's rights, isolating them, like manipulating a situation to your advantage. So we
Mhm.
know what it is, but then how do we actually admit to it? And then also, I want to give one story. One of my conferences, there was a father who came to my conference. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. If you can't afford it, like, I just want to educate people. It's like, if you can get some benefit from it, and as a father, absolutely. And he was telling me how he was being abused, and his children, his wife, his ex-wife, were having these high conflict, high situation. And he came to the conference, and to me, it was in 2022, because that was the first conference, I think, in the world that was federally funded, that focused on victimized men. But in my mind, it's like, I'm not going to say, yeah, you're victimized, you're a perpetrator, because you're not necessarily only in one category all the time. But if you are victimized, but you can see what is an abuser, right? Then you can learn also. Actually, at the end of that conference, he realized, wait a minute, even though he was abused for all these ways, he actually saw, he got a light bulb and goes, oh, I actually was an abuser as well. I engaged in that. I did that. I didn't realize. And that was a turning point for him. Now he understood why his children didn't want to be with him and his wife, his ex-wife, didn't want to be with him. And then they were able to resolve it. So I think that it's more of, you know, also I think when I've gone into homes and when people are going against each other, it's like we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. We don't acknowledge, like the way you say something actually is interpreted in very different ways. But the thing is, who actually says to somebody, "Hey, you know what you just said? It feels like this." A lot of times that doesn't really happen and it just escalates, right? But as soon as you say, "Wait, that's what the intent was this," but when you said that, it meant that. And I think when people realize, oh, wait a minute, my communication, I didn't mean that. I've had fathers who emailed me and said, hey, Sue, because I'm now an accredited family mediator. Hey, Sue, can you help me with my parenting agreement? I'm like, first of all, you don't write, one parent should not write the whole parenting agreement. That's not what a parenting agreement is. It's supposed to be two people together. But I go, they go, but I just want to move this process along. I go, okay, send it to me. I was like, hey, all the sentences like take out, take out, take out. No, 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 no. Like, because like, but they don't see it as trying to be, you know, taking the control or telling what to say, but it's the way they write it. The intent, that's not their intent. But the way you wrote it, I'm sorry, that was the intent. We got to take that out. Right? So it's more
Mhm.
of how do you talk, you know, communicate with the others more effectively. And then to acknowledge one's own behavior and actually, but doing it in a way that's not finger pointing, not in a way that's saying, hey, you are an abuser. Like I would never go into a family to saying that, but I would show the clear signs night and day. Like this is very clear. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're going to apologize to your children right in front of me. But you never back anybody up into a corner. If you back them to a
Mhm.
corner, they will fight, right? They will not,
Mhm.
they'll double down. But it's like, no, no, no. You said this, but maybe you meant this, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I meant that. Okay, yeah, but it came across like this. Okay, then take accountability for it. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I see that. I'm sorry. Right? And it's
Mhm.
so it's a way of acknowledging with and trying to improve that. Like this is what you want to get. Hey, here's another way. Maybe you should say this. Say it with this, you know, like try to say it in another different way. But people, how many times do people actually say, you know what, if you said it this way, who gets corrected? A lot of times people don't want to, uh, raise the issue, but then that type of communication just doesn't gel. But sometimes you hear conversations like, wow, that sounds abusive, but they have an understanding among them. But if I think it's okay, you're okay, we're okay with it, we understand it, then that's fine. Because who are we to say what is abusive? But if you're putting somebody
Mhm.
down, you know what I mean? That's different, right? But a lot of times people just don't label it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think thank you so much for diving into the antidote. I think that's really, I think a lot of people would really appreciate kind of hearing other people's experiences of learning
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
what's happening, what abuse is, and maybe that they don't have their own abusive tendencies or have committed abuse in the past. And giving language and like people the knowledge is really, as you mentioned, is powerful, is power.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
really appreciate diving into that. And I
Yeah.
kind of just want to end off. Oh yeah, keep if you want to jump
And
in.
also, we're very good. But also, it's also initiating, like saying a little something just to get, but you know each other's buttons, right? It's like, so just because you're in a mood or whatever, if you initiate a little something, then it's going to go, right? So it's also recognizing those things that might be annoying or even verbalizing it. Because I've gone into families where people don't really know what annoys them, but then I go, no, what's really annoying? It's like, oh, when you do this. And that's something they just never really thought about. Well, then that person will stop doing it, right? And they didn't realize that that was annoying. Or when I call you this name, you don't like it. I think it's cute, but you don't like it. Oh, I didn't realize. And maybe for whatever reason, you don't even know why you don't want to be called that, but it just annoys you. It's like, okay, then have you told that person? That really hurts me. That annoys me. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. Stop it. Then like this.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I got one more question in the chat really quickly, so I'll dive into it quickly. So our listener said, let's assume gatekeeping sends a message to a child. An example, if unclear, is canceling a scheduled arrangement to go to an amusement park. As it's clearly more nuanced than physical abuse may say, where can
Right.
I reference the literature as to the impact of this message?
If you go into Google Scholar, which is great. I use this all the time, and go extreme gatekeeping. And actually, it was actually termed maternal gatekeeping in the 1990s, and maternal for a reason, right? Usually, it's the mothers who are doing the gatekeeping, and it could be facilitative because a lot of the research has shown that a lot of mothers are the ones who help facilitate and encourage the fathers to get involved with the children. But extreme gatekeeping, yeah, that's the opposite. And now we have the new terminology, the terminology of, parental alienation, and that does exist. Okay, because when children have a good relationship, what happened in the years before the union breakdown, both parents were fine. Then there was a union breakdown and finances and everything, and then all of a sudden, the times are changing. Or it's also the messaging when children come back and you go, oh, are you okay, are you fine? You're trying to imply, and that's probably, maybe sometimes it's intentional or not intentional, you're trying to say the other side's not safe. You don't have to go if you don't want to. You want to stay here? And there's other people who are very manipulative. I know one family, the one father who spent $1 million. The mother, it was like he had the timing, and then I think he had like maybe a 10-day stretch or something with the children. Okay. And the day before the children were to go to his house, she bought a kitten. Or was it a dog? I can't remember. A dog or a kitten? A kitten. It was a kitten. Right before, so that the kids wanted to go back to the mom. And the father's like, had no choice. Right? Okay, then let's go back. Let's go see. Right? So this extreme gatekeeping, it's just, and in the end, or this competition, if your child loves you more than the other parent, there's no winners in that. Okay? Because this will affect the children. Fatherless or parentless child, all the negative things that you can think of, that's what's going to happen. They're more likely to happen than children who grow up with 2, 3, caregivers, right? And so nobody wins in this. And children, the long-term effects are huge. Suicide, drugs, early pregnancy, like you name it, it happens in usually fatherless children. The sign is very clear, right? And my bottom line is, and let's end with this, I guess, is that the more people who love your children, the better, right? You might not get along at the adult level. That is totally fine. But if that adult treats your children fine, does not criticize them, does not make them feel bad, right? And you don't criticize each other in front of them, or so they could sort of listen, but not listen or hear, come on. We all know what, your intent, right? The more people who love your children, the better that they will be, because any union breakdown is very hard for children, but we can help protect them. So hopefully people will work together, at least neutrally. You don't have to be lovey. Oh, I love you. I hope no, but at least neutral.
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, I want to give a round of applause to you, Sue. I know everyone else is clapping, but I'll give you a clap myself. Thank you for a fabulous webinar. We truly appreciate it on the AVA team. Thank you so much. For everyone that's attending today, I think Jason's going to follow up with a follow-up survey about the webinar. So here at AVA, we can continue to grow and improve our webinars for everyone. So thank you, everybody. We truly appreciate it.